What is up, Internet Basketball Junkies? Coach Hack here. In this episode of the Basketball Legacy Project tells the story of my dad, Coach Larry Hackenberg, and three generations of basketball coaches. From growing up in Canton South with his father, Herb Hackenberg, serving as an assistant under Red Ash, to becoming a head coach at just 22 years old, to returning more than 2 decades away from coaching, Larry's coaching journey is unique, to say the least. Along the way, we'll explore his basketball philosophy, unconventional program building strategies, an adaptable coaching style, and the unique experience of coaching me. Dad, welcome to the show today.
Thank you. Glad to do it.
Yeah, so just to give an update on how and why we're here is we had a Father's Day recently, and I didn't know what to get you. And I decided on giving you an invitation to a live stream appearance where we could celebrate your coaching career and document some of these stories. It was a selfish gift. It's more for me than I think it is for you, but I'm really excited to preserve these memories and a lot of these stories that we've shared with one another through the years, to put them out there for anybody to view. So I'm excited about it. I recently got game film converted. I was up in my attic. I had a box of tapes. Some of them were my high school film, some my college film. Some of it was your high school film that I snuck in there. But I had that converted, and I'm planning to use that in some of these segments here today.
Do you have to?
Yeah, we're going to look at some 1960s Canton South basketball film. But you just had a birthday, so my invitation to you was to come on around your birthday, 78 years old. For your 75th birthday, we put a special project together where we reached out to a lot of your friends, and we asked them to write you notes about what you've meant to them, and that came together really well. So I'm just considering this kind of an extension of that 75th birthday project, where all your friends were sharing memories with you as another way just to preserve your legacy and help you share your knowledge and wisdom from your coaching career with some of the younger coaches out there. So with that, Dad, I want to dive in. And what I really wanted to start with here was not necessarily your coaching career, but the thing that I thought that you did the best as a coach. In all of my coaching, I don't know that I've seen anybody better at teaching and executing a primary break. So our heritage teams, we had a structured primary break where we were really attacking full throttle off of a team's made baskets. So tell us a little bit about the strategy behind this primary break system.
Well, I had been out of coaching for 20 some years, got back in thinking that I understood how the game was played, and discovered in that first year things had changed a bit. And in the off season between my first and second year at Heritage Christian, I did a lot of film study, a lot of the kind of things that were available that you're now doing to relearn basketball.
Yeah.
And one of the series, one of the tapes was to a school that had gone full throttle into the running game, and they were averaging 120 points, small college, and the break that they ran, in addition to having studied, I think it was Paul Westhead's break, this is what we came up with. And I think people will recognize the numbered break here. That was, it was very effective for us. We started from scratch in the summer of that second year. You were a junior, and we could immediately see how much the kids enjoyed playing the system, that we basically copied from those 2 tapes that we had studied, over the summer.
Yeah, the break was lethal. I watched maybe 4 games to put together film for this session that we're having right now, and it didn't take me very much to find a lot of clips of us just running the ball down teams' throats with great pace. One of the films that I was watching, we got up, I think 11-0, doing our pressing and trapping and shooting threes. And the opponent, who was a good opponent, finally squeaked out a basket to make it 11-2. And we immediately primary braked right back at them and scored maybe within 4 or 5 seconds of the ball going through the hoop. So just kind of devastating results when this thing was humming on all cylinders. Talk to me a little bit about, everyone has a defined role and responsibility in this primary break. Why is role clarity so important in executing a break like this?
It becomes a habit. Basketball is a game of habits. And if you remember, Matt, we would run the break without any defense over and over and over again every single night, rotating who would get the shot. You guys had to get real sick of that, I think. And we put the timer on, and but there wasn't a night that went by that we didn't run this. It became like clockwork. No hesitation. You knew if you were the two, even if you had to cross the court to get to your lane. And we debated about that. Wouldn't it just be better to, go from where you were? But we used the system that we had seen on tape, and it worked for us.
Yeah, that was the cycles drill that I remember us running, where we had to get all 5 shots made in a certain amount of time. And this break was something I stole and executed during my coaching career. I had great success, particularly at St. Thomas Aquinas, really running this 4-out break. And this was something that I would do in practice with my teams in a block on a daily basis. Was, we'd have maybe 3 different teams rotating through based on how our sub rotations were shaken out. And each team had to get all 5 shots made. And I believe it was a 41-second clock going 5 trips. But one of the things that I always appreciated about this primary break system was how balanced it ended up being. Meaning we got penetration, we got 3-pointers, we got inside out, we got all different kinds of, left side, right side of the court. Talk to me a little bit about getting a balanced outcome out of a primary breaking system like this, where you're not just running it for 3-pointers, but you can hurt teams in a variety of ways.
If I'm not mistaken, we expanded the cycles into what we would call the secondary break, where if we didn't get what we were looking for up that right sideline, or the guy running goal to goal, we had options once we got up there. It might be a dribble handoff. It might be, I think we had 3 or 4 major things that we would go right into. We didn't have much need for a standard 5-on-5 offense. And it may have hurt us, at some point in time, that if somebody took away, our ability to run the break. But that secondary break was really good, really fun coaching, in that you didn't have to be trying to figure out what should we be running now. The defense, was dictating it.
Yeah, in a little bit of an unconventional fashion, the film that we're watching now, you have a 6'7" guy as your inbound and trailer, who is also stretching the defense with his 3-point shooting as a trailer in this system. And that's something that I copied in my coaching career. We're looking at John Timmer as a stretch 5 in this system with our 4-man running rim to rim. And I used that particularly at Aquinas. I had Austin Hill, who was 6'3" or 6'4", but he really stretched the defense as that trail guy. But I think we've seen in some of these clips already, we had like that option where we could hand it off to the wing and that would generate an action. I did a lot of flare screens on the back side. But you're right. Having a primary break system like this just takes a lot of pressure off your half-court offense, and that's something that you need to be careful with in coaching, is that there might be times in games where you can't generate as much offense as you normally do off of your primary break, and you've still got to be prepared to play a half-court game. Some teams you'll be able to just boat race off the court playing with this pace, but you really do have to have a half-court game as well. What mistakes do you think coaches make in teaching transition offense? Things that come to my mind is kind of maybe allowing teams to cut the head off the snake by, attacking the point guard and making the point guard slow down, or things like using a tempo press to maybe slow the breakdown. Can you think of any mistakes coaches make in implementing a system like this?
Maybe just that whole idea of over dependence on it, where when there's going to be games where, people are going to figure out how to slow this down to where you don't have it. You're pretty much sitting out there at half court with your point man with the ball, and hey, you got to run good things to get good shots. And I think it can maybe make you lazy from the standpoint of developing that part of your offense.
Yeah. What
And
mistakes?
I think I did that.
What mistakes do you think players make in executing this system?
We always emphasized sprinting. And my assistant coach even was more attuned to that than, what I was. Paul Johnson. He would watch guys to see if they were going 100%, because if you're a little bit tired, you haven't, your number hasn't come up, you haven't gotten very much out of that sprint down the court, the break isn't going to be as effective. I think our team was in shape without necessarily spending a lot of time running the traditional conditioning drills. Yeah. That drill that we just discussed, the cycles, you're going to be in pretty good shape if you're doing that hard and you have people watching that you're going full speed. So there's some sprinting going on. That's Scott Garber, who probably was a double-figure scorer for us or close to it. And that's about all he got, was that rim to rim. He ran it hard every time. And then we replaced him the next year with Demarius Gully, and probably very few games he didn't get 2 or 3 buckets at least with a rim-to-rim sprint. We had good point guards with their head up to deliver those passes.
Yeah, you can't jog with this. It does require you to play with some depth. You can't be rolling out a 5-man team where you're not going to do substitutions and expect the players to be able to run hard the entire game. And I think, while we're talking about, what mistakes players make when executing a system like this, it would be to thinking of this break as like an individual thing as opposed to a team thing, where it requires all 5 guys to do their role. And you can't have one guy who just says, well, I'm probably not going to get the ball on this trip, so I'm not going to run hard. It takes everybody putting pressure on the defense to stretch the defense horizontally and vertically. And you've got to do that on an every possession basis where you're getting out and sprinting those lanes. Is there anything that you could identify on film that would let you know that the primary break was working, even if we weren't generating a lot of points through it?
Not that I can immediately think about. What about you? What would you look for?
Well, I would be looking for the opposing team, if they're hunched over and they're grabbing their shorts and they're tired, that we're creating a tempo and a conditioning element to the game that we are ready for, and they might not necessarily be ready for. So that's, kind of what I was thinking. But this is a great segment on this primary break system. It's something that I used through my coaching career very successfully. I stole that from you directly, and I kind of wanted to pivot here.
You
Go ahead, Dan.
enhanced it dramatically. You started at the same place, I think, and then really with the flare screens and those secondary options. I, I wouldn't have wanted to play your Aquinas teams with that system that you had built there.
Yeah, I wanted to start the show here with some tactics, and we accomplished that. And I wanted to get into your basketball coaching story. And that starts at Canton South High School. This show is titled It's in the Blood, because basketball has really been a 3-generation story in our family. My grandpa, Herb, coached under Red Ash at Canton South and coached you. Then you coached me at Heritage. So I guess my first question to you is, did I really have a choice in this, or was just basketball coaching just destined to me?
Well, I didn't see the things coming that eventually evolved, and I remember when you had the first opportunity to coach high school as an assistant coach with Chad Spurgeon. I think it was a quandary to you as to whether you really wanted to coach or not. At least that was my impression. Certainly, you weren't pushed towards that by me, and I really don't think that I was by my dad. So maybe it was just destiny, for all of us. And what's ironic is that our careers, there's a lot of similarity. My dad was a head coach, and it was back in the year 1931, Great Depression, and he got a head coaching job at a very small school called North Industry, which would become Canton South later. He was, probably 21 or 22. Well, he was 21 years old when his season started. And my coaching career, after coming out of Wooster College and being told you can't just go out and get a head coaching job, well, I did the same thing like my dad did. I was hired at a school called Crestview in Columbiana County in Ohio. And yours was not so immediate, but you were a very young head coach going into St. Thomas Aquinas. We all three, in the first time around, coached about the same length of time, around 10 years. My dad was 10 years. I coached 8 years. Your head coaching career, I think, a little bit longer than that. And so we got into it early in life and got out of it pretty early in life. It's interesting that we would have that in common without ever planning it, thinking about it. But in looking back, a lot of similarities there.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily draw that connection. I am interested in hearing a little bit more about my grandpa, Herb. I know that he was an English teacher. I know that he was kind of famous for using the Reader's Digest as a way to teach his students. But tell me a little bit about him as a basketball coach, his role with the team, his identity as a teacher in with the English language. I'm interested in hearing more about that.
Well, he when we were living in Cambridge, Ohio, and when I was had finished sixth grade, we moved to Canton, and he took a job at Canton South High School. First as a freshman basketball coach, he had a guy that he was helping to develop that would become an NBA player. His name was Dick Cunningham. He eventually grew to about 6'10" and was the backup center for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar when Jabbar played for the Milwaukee Bucks. I believe still under the name of Lou Alcindor. That changed somewhere along the line there. So Dad, I think that he was brought there by Coach Ash somewhat with the idea to help in Dick Cunningham's development. And certainly that worked out nicely. And then he moved up to becoming the assistant coach to Red. And by the opposition and around the county, they were kind of viewed as a coaching team, even though my dad had really been quite successful as a high school coach in his own right, but he had been out of it now for 20 years. Does that sound familiar? He hadn't coached basketball for 20 years. In Cambridge, he ran a grocery store and then went back to being a teacher, and he was a tennis coach of all things. But in the Canton area, Stark County, I still can find some old timers. They talk about Red and Hack being this coaching tandem. Both of them were, wired pretty tight. They both could raise Cain, and they were a great team. Coach Ash had success on his own. He had coaching success with a guy named Dan Dowling helping him. He had coaching success with Andy Marco as his assistant. So not to take anything away from my high school coach, Red Ash, but together they were pretty much, I think, a coaching juggernaut. They balanced each other, very, very well.
Yeah, I'm going to flip on some film of 1966 Canton South basketball playing against McKinley, I believe. But I'm interested in hearing from you. What made Coach Ash such an influential figure in the coaching world?
He did study basketball. The people that he was coaching against probably didn't know as much basketball as he did. But I think way, way beyond that was the fact that he had a big personality, and he had some ego, and he felt like he could beat anybody, and that we should be able to beat anybody. So this is McKinley, and this is the tournament game of my senior year. They're number one in the state. And we had quite a bit of a tradition there playing against McKinley. And in the previous year, my junior year, we had knocked them out of the tournament. They were number one in the state at that time. And after the loss to us, there was a riot that was a part of the news all across the state of Ohio. And so this is, we're playing against the best here. And to answer your question, Coach Ash had you believing that you could do things that you probably shouldn't have been able to do on sheer talent.
Yeah.
We returned no starters. Well, one starter from the team that had beat us McKinley the year before in the tournament, and I think we were expected to be about third or fourth place in our league. We went undefeated with a brand new team. It always gets me when you see articles about a team and saying, well, they lost two starters or they lost three starters. That was pretty commonplace at Canton South when I was down there, in that you had to wait your turn to get a chance to play. And I didn't get to play very much as a junior because we had guys. There was always players that they'd been waiting their turn and been in the system, and they believed, that they were very good and couldn't beat anybody, and we usually did.
What do you remember about Coach Ash's coaching style? I remember you telling me that he didn't use a deep bench. I think maybe he would be running maybe five guys exclusively, or maybe a six man. And talk to me a little bit about just the lore of Canton South basketball. You mentioned a little bit about the rivalry with McKinley. McKinley is a statewide power, multiple state championships through the years. Lots of NBA players coming out of McKinley. Talk about Red Ash's coaching style and the lore of Canton South basketball.
Well, we moved here at I was in the seventh grade, and the first year my dad was doing freshman, but we would go to the games and maybe some scouting that I might have tagged along to. Probably in the eighth grade, every game, and my dad was on the bench then. Kids in the neighborhood, we'd go to the game. Well, some of the players would come over and talk to you, and they had such a tradition. Coach Ash by that time had been there about 25 years, all winning seasons, never had a losing season, not one ever. And one of the traditions was the team would come out of the locker room, and they had a theme song. It was called what the heck was that?
The Muskrat something.
The Muskrat Ramble. It was a song from like the 1940s.
Yeah.
And they never changed it, and you never heard it anywhere else. Friends of mine that played at Canton Lincoln, they would make fun of it. Janet Creighton, who was like the mayor, big political figure in the Canton area, she was a cheerleader for Lincoln, and she was still laughing about that 30, 40 years later. But I just dreamed of, full house, and you're going to run out in your warm-up uniform, which was pretty cool for the time, we thought. And he had a multicolored ball like the old ABA, way before the ABA existed. And you'd run out there for your warm-up, thought it was the coolest thing. And, it was one of those feelings of, I want to do that someday.
Yeah, the coaches watching all aspire to try to build something like what Canton South had when you played there, where all the kids growing up wanted to be on the varsity team. It was a special community that really followed the team closely. That's what the coaches are fighting for to try to create nowadays. Talk to me a little bit about some of the legendary players and coaches from the Canton area around this time, Dad.
Well, some of them were at Canton South. Guys like the aforementioned Dick Cunningham, who was playing at about 6'10" by the time he was a senior. But McKinley had guys like that. It wasn't like Dick Cunningham was playing against 6-foot guys or something. You get those McKinley games, and one of the teams, they had a couple 6'8s, Bill Morgan, guy they called Bo Peep Jackson. Later at McKinley, and better known and better basketball player was Nick Weatherspoon. Nick would go on to play for Illinois, would end up with a career in the NBA, mostly, I think, with the Baltimore Bullets at that time. And the rival of Nick Weatherspoon, playing around 1968, I believe, would have been Luke Whitty. Luke played at Marlington. He was 6'10", and would go on to play for Ohio State, and later on for a while with the Cleveland Cavaliers. So the great players abounded, and big guys, little guys. And I think one of the things that promoted the development of the players was summer basketball, which was completely different in these days, where it was independent of coaches. You had various courts that became popular, and you were playing against the best of the high school players, but even more valuable, the college guys would come home and play. And this team I was on, we made great use of that. Every night we'd go to a court, guys from the city, we'd go up into the city to play. And you're playing against kids from McKinley, Lincoln, Timken, Lehman, and then college guys, were coming back. We couldn't compete very well. We hardly won games in the summer. You'd have to wait in line to play, and you might eventually play and lose right away. Well, you got to go find a different court then.
Yeah, thinking about that is just so different than how it is nowadays. Probably hard for a lot of coaches to imagine, who are used to organizing workouts and shootouts and all those things with their teams. It wasn't organized like that back then. You'd take your 5 where you self-organized, and you'd meet up at different playgrounds. What is special and unique about basketball in the 1960s? We're watching film here. Obviously, the skill of the game has changed. But there are things about 1960s basketball that are much, much better than today's basketball. And some of this would be like the atmosphere and the environments, where I think you can find some pockets of very passionate teams that are followed. But I go around and I watch a lot of basketball games, and I see a lot of empty stands. Thinking about Canton South and McKinley, thinking about things like All City Night. It was a special environment to play high school basketball that the community really supported. What do you think is unique and special about basketball in the 1960s?
Yeah, I think just exactly what you said. It was the thing that you wanted to be a part of because it was so popular. You go to a class reunion after having been out of school for 50 years or something like that. And you get your fellow students, so many of them talking about, watching you play and knowing, what they're talking about. Students went to games. It was a social activity in most of the schools. And most gyms, even where they may not have had a great team, you'd have a respectable crowd. So we were playing in front of people, and it was a big deal. And you were given a lot of respect to be on these teams. maybe even if you weren't playing that much. And you might be very pleased, you wanted to be on the floor all the time, but it meant something to be part of the team. I think now it's more individualized, and if I don't get minutes, then why am I doing all this hard work? We didn't have that attitude where I was.
Yeah, I think that kids are getting pulled in so many different directions. There's definitely something special about basketball in that era. Obviously, skills are going to progress through the years, but some of the really neat elements of basketball in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s all had unique features that were better in some shape or fashion than what basketball is now. You touched on it a little bit already, but you went on to play basketball at the College of Wooster and then became a head varsity coach at the age of 22. How do you even get a head coaching job at the age of 22? I'm used to telling people that I was a first time head coach at the age of 26. Like that is some impressive feat. But both my dad and my grandpa were both head coaches by the time they were 21 and 22 years old. So talk to me a little bit about how you even get the opportunity to be a head varsity coach at the age of 22.
First of all, you got to try. And for some reason, I was not passionate about being an assistant coach. I didn't even know I was going to teach and coach. In the first place, I thought that I would be a warrior in a place called Vietnam. But the draft board eventually ruled that they didn't want me. I had a deferment due to a physical injury, one that probably was a result of playing basketball for that matter. So I knew I wanted to be a head coach, and that's what I applied for, several of the openings that I saw. And I presented myself as being unique enough to be ready to be a head coach because of who I had played for. Coach Ash, who was a big promoter of me, and my college coach, Coach Al Van Wee, who was respected in the coaching field. And I kind of found out later was also a major promoter of me, even though our relationship had become very strained by the end of my playing career at Worcester College. So I was willing to try, and I thought I had a story about, I played in systems where, we had good results, winning programs, and that my dad had been a lifelong coach. And I actually had two jobs that I was told I was being hired for. The first one, the superintendent was fired during that whole process before it had become official. I hope I didn't get the poor guy fired. But the second one that I did was told that I would be hired, came through. It was Crestview High School. I didn't know much about it. I didn't care very much what it was. I wanted a head coaching job. And that's where you got to be careful sometimes. Yes, I won the job, not knowing what the job was. And after I was hired, I think afterwards I discovered they had gone 1-18 the previous year, and that the team that they beat had also gone 1-18. They had beat each other in home-to-home meetings. That's not, ordinarily a promising situation that you're stepping into. And I'm in there as a brash young kid, and I'm telling them, we're going to win a state championship here. They must have never heard that before. because they did hire me. But then you start looking at it, and you have to wonder, well, who else was applicants? Who did you beat out for the job? Who wants a 1-18 program that hadn't won really for about a decade, and a very small rural community, and we were able to win there. And I don't attribute it so much to understanding how to coach basketball as it's timing, and a lot of factors enter into it. I thought we had some talent, and I kept thinking, how do these guys lose 18 games a year before? That one, it was kind of interesting in that we finished a little bit over 500, which was a big deal. Maybe won about 11 games, and we were going into the tournament with probably our best player having suffered an injury to his knee. And therefore, you had open seating at that time. You didn't have preconceived places on the bracket. You had seeded teams, and then you drew pills to determine the order of placing yourself on a bracket. And we had an opportunity to have a bye that would allow extra time for that injury to heal. Kid's name was Ronnie Athey, and we wanted him to be available. And if he had that amount of time, a couple weeks, I think it was, to recuperate, would help us a lot. But by virtue of picking that place, we would play the number one seed in the tournament, who was also ranked number 4 in the state and had been to the state the previous year. It was a school called Sebring, just east of Alliance. And we had actually scrimmaged them. I thought we had done pretty well in the scrimmage. But so when it came my turn to place our team in the tournament on the bracket, it looked like I was jumping into Sebring. And the Youngstown Vindicator covered the draw, and a reporter, collared me after the drawing, and he said, "Why would you, pick that? You had all kind of other places. Why did you want to jump in there? You'll probably be playing Sebring." Well, you don't want to tell them, well, we got an injury. Didn't want to disclose that. So I said, well, because I think that, we're going to beat them. We know them, we've scrimmaged them, and, we're going to beat them. The press had fun with that from a 21-year-old coach who's saying, like forecasting like Joe Namath did. And lo and behold, our kids went out in the tournament, never having played a tournament game. And they had people that had played on that state team the year before. I think we beat them by about 10 points. And the community went crazy, absolutely crazy. And that probably allowed me to leave for the next year and get the next job that I felt I needed for my coaching progression.
Dad, I have this signature product on my store. It's called Powerhouse Program Building, and it's all about getting head coaching jobs or maximizing the basketball program you have if you're already a head coach. And one of the things that I talk about in this Powerhouse Program Building is avoiding graveyard coaching jobs. And it sounds like you got yourself set up in a graveyard coaching job situation. And a lot of young coaches have a lot of enthusiasm for what they're doing. They take a bad job and it sours their coaching career or creates such a resume stain that they really can't get another opportunity without some kind of a regrouping period. So you didn't have the luxury of searching on the internet to find the records of the team that you were going to take over. You were a little bit surprised. You made the most of that situation, and you were able to leverage it into another head coaching job, which is also something that I recommend to coaches if they find themselves in a graveyard coaching job, which is to do the best you can, elevate the program as high as you can, and get out, because graveyard coaching jobs tend to kind of zap your soul if they're really graveyard head coaching jobs, and they're hard to dig your way out of. So you get out of Crestview and you take a job at Minerva. Tell me about your stint at Minerva and the community, the Minerva community.
Well, I would very much agree with what you just talked about. And I did do that. I did take a graveyard coaching position out of ignorance and out of ego that it doesn't matter because I'll be such a great coach. And I wasn't. The coaching aspect, you're a great coach maybe when you have talent and the situation is right, but you might be a very ordinary coach camouflaged as a great coach because of those other factors that are involved. I was fortunate. I did have kids, and we won some notable games, and won enough of them where it looked like we'd had a real good season. One of the things that was discouraging about the Crestview situation was that just the whole makeup of the school district. It was 3 tiny communities. There really was not a community per se. It's like some of the consolidated schools that they're fragmented. And the Minerva job was especially appealing because it was truly a community. And it was a community that at the time I got the basketball job, they had rallied around football. That was a really big deal. And in the maybe 4 years earlier, they had rallied around basketball with an undefeated team. And I thought that was, very much a benefit when you had that community-minded spirit where people could, really get behind, especially a successful program. I remember driving into town, and the first thing that jumped out on you was the public swimming pool packed with kids, in like probably July that I, first drove into that community, not knowing very much about it, but you could tell business district and had all the attributes of community. I think that really, really helps you. And maybe you experienced that in a couple different ways in your coaching journey. That was kind of always a question about Glen Oak when you were there, that, are they really together, or do you have multiple communities within, your program?
Yeah, I certainly remember from my time at St. Thomas, the fraternal feeling, particularly with our coaching staff, where I had multiple people on staff that were very community people, and they lived and breathed St. Thomas Aquinas. After games, we were out in the community. They were a really nice buffer between me and the community. But I also remember on some of our tournament runs, just some of the buildup as we would advance to the next round, just the community swell and the good feelings just getting larger and larger. One thing I always admired about your teams was how they played, but I also think you did a really good job of intentionally building culture. You were able to get buy-in and bring people together with your teams. One of the ways that you did that, I remember, was a book study. Our heritage teams used this 5-point playbook from Coach K. And I think that was very intentional on your behalf as a way to kind of maybe brainwash us a little bit into thinking a certain way about our group. How did you discover this Coach K group, and why did you think it was a good fit for heritage in our teams as a way to sell a philosophy of a basketball team?
I think I just bought that book off the shelf. I'm a bookstore kind of guy, and I think I saw that and thought, wonder what this is all about. And I think I read it and was so impressed by it. And I think I think I gave the book to my assistant coach, again, Paul Johnson, and I think he was the one who maybe suggested, why don't we make the kids read this? One of the problems we had this was between your junior and senior year, my first and second year at Heritage, we had composure problems as an entity in that first year. We had guys who could not handle anything remotely close to failing, and would just throw tantrums, and it was awful. It was embarrassing, absolutely embarrassing at times. And one of the things that stuck out to Coach Johnson and myself, there's a big deal in that Coach K book. He calls it next play. Remember us using that as a tagline so many times? Anytime somebody would make an error and start to fuss about it, next play, next play. It's a really critical area of basketball. The game is so fast, you can't afford to have a lapse because you made a mistake. So I think more than anything, Coach Johnson, whose son also played on the team, he thought it really represented what we wanted to become as a culture. And I think he suggested it. And didn't we take and go over the book in segments, like at least once a week? We'd be sitting there all with the book in hand. We bought books for every kid. And I think it helped us a lot.
Yeah, and this is dense reading. I've done some book studies with my teams through the years, and they were shorter reads. It was a John Gordon book where you could read in a few sittings if you wanted to. This was not necessarily written to be a team book study, but you did a nice job of chunking it up and having different sections for us assigned to us. And the next play concept, I think, was a really big deal for our team. But there's also this idea of the fist. And the metaphor is, you've got 5 fingers on a hand.
Yeah.
And individually, they're weak. But when you bring them together to form a fist, they become strong. And we had a lot of talent on that team, particularly for a smaller school. And to get people to buy into the idea of playing not as individuals, but playing as a fist, playing together, I think was a driving force behind the success that we had. But certainly, the players read portions of the books. We did do those book studies where we would go off the court. We'd be in a classroom style, and we would be doing a 45-minute session where we went over the assigned reading for that period and tried to apply those lessons like the fist and next play. And this was such a big deal that you bought practice jerseys, and the practice jerseys had, our numbers and heritage on them, but they had a big fist in the middle. Do you recall those practice jerseys, Dad?
I'd forgotten about the fist. You're right. And I'd forgotten about the practice jerseys. And, we openly talked about what we were learning when we might have a huddle to talk to the team. Yeah, I think you're really bringing back some memories to me here. That was certainly a big factor for us. And then some years after that, they made a big deal in the press in Ohio about Jim Tressel coaching Ohio State football. And in doing book study, that they had to read a book in the summer, and they used it in the same way. That was probably 5 to 10 years after this that we had done. It wasn't like we read a book somewhere that said, "Hey, you ought to make your kids read a book."
Yeah.
It just happened.
Is this something that you would recommend to coaches as a consistent thing they have in their program? I used it mostly as a
absolutely.
I used it mostly as a there was a captain's application process that we would go through. So some years we had done a team-wide book study, but other years I would do it just with the people that wanted to be a captain. And if you wanted to be a captain, part of that process was you had to go through some captain's training, which was like a book study. And I used different books throughout my coaching career. But there's a lot of demands on student athletes. Do you think this is a yearly thing for coaches, or do you think this is more situational when they have a group that they know specific lessons should really apply to?
I think I'd recommend it every year, although I didn't do it. That's the only year that I remember doing such a thing.
Yeah, I've had success with these book studies. I've found value in them. To this point in the show, we've covered your primary break, your early background in basketball playing and both coaching, using book studies as a culture building tactic. Now I wanted to kind of get into your second coaching career. So talk me through here. Why did you disappear from coaching for over 20 years?
Well, it started off with becoming disillusioned. The Minerva job was a great job. We had some great successes, particularly early on when I got there. The overreaching goal of building program like I had grown up in Canton South, that wasn't happening there. We had some struggles. It became more difficult to have the basketball players you really needed always, because there was a predominance of football. Some kids discontinued playing to specialize in the other sport. Had some bad luck, probably some bad coaching, but I tired of the struggle. It wore me down, and I wanted to see if I could do something else. Had children now and one income, and I thought it's time to support my family better. It's time to try to make some real money. I think at the time that I got out of coaching and teaching, we were probably running on $11,000 or $12,000 a year. That was, before all the inflation since 1980, which has been enormous. But time to try something different, and I didn't ever go into it in the first place thinking that I wanted to do it the rest of my life. So I was attracted to the sales field, the idea of having an unlimited upside potential, if you could help people, in that realm. So, I left. And what was the question in the first place? Oh, yeah. Why why did I get to that and why did I want to get back? Well, I was out of it 20 years, but not entirely, because I had these kids, one of which was you and three others, and they played basketball. They didn't really have much of a choice, did they? And we did it through a church program called First Friends that Greg Linville had built this program. And, you know, for most of those years, once I'd been out of official coaching for a while, I was coaching up at the church, and I coached Luke and Aaron and Lindsay, and then I coached you. It would usually consist of about 5 or 6 years that I would be coaching you through the system. And it was really good for me, I think, from a coaching standpoint, because with young kids, the teaching of fundamentals, you really had to go to the very basics. And I think I learned to teach fundamentals maybe a little bit better, even though I think I had always emphasized what I thought were fundamental things like pivoting and stopping and all the things that you can come up with that are fundamental. But probably what made me get back in, created the impetus for that, was I was disenchanted with the school system and the basketball program for my youngest child, who I thought would become under the right circumstances, I thought he would become a very good basketball player. And that was you. And I didn't feel like the system was fair to a kid like you were at the time, which was kind of immature and small. Maybe not the most athletic kid in the world, at least not in things that are first looked at, like jumping and running, speed. And I wanted to see if we couldn't get you, unbeknownst to you, into a situation at a smaller school where you would have time to develop maturity. And so I went and scouted places. I'd go off to games looking for what I thought might be a good fit. I thought about Minerva. I thought about St. Thomas probably, and I would go and watch them play. And one of the places I ended up going to was a Christian school, Heritage Christian, which I knew a little bit about. I went to watch them play 2 games on a weekend, Friday and a Saturday. I watched both games, and it hit me front and center. This is the place for my kid. And also in line with what your mom and I believe spiritually. So, Cripe, I got on the phone after the season, called the coach at Heritage, told him how much I liked what he was doing, and that I wanted to bring my kid over. He said, "That's very nice of you to say all those things, but I'm not going to be the coach. I've resigned." And but I think they're going to hire this assistant coach of mine. That was like in May, and through the month of June, they had never hired anybody yet. It was not a priority to them. And I think they were going to hire somebody from the mission field, and they were waiting for that person to get back home from the mission field. So I called him on the phone, and I said, "Hey, I've been waiting to see who the basketball coach is because I'd like to enroll my son. And what's up? And if you don't have somebody you're going to hire, I'd like to apply for the job." And the guy said, "Okay, well, if if you'd like to apply for it, come on over. So I went over for an interview, and one of the things he said was, "What's up with you? Are you having midlife crisis?" Because I'd been out for 20 years. And I said, I've already been through that. We're past that stage. But I kind of talked myself into the job. Within a week, I'd say, he called and said, "Hey, we're gonna do this with you." It was very appealing to me. I had built a business that was doing pretty well by that time. This was a non-teaching supplemental contract, paid almost nothing, didn't matter. And I thought I'd enjoy coaching small school basketball like I had started off doing, 20 some years earlier there at Crestview, which was very small. And yeah, I was elated. I remember they had a female athletic director, Crystal Spicer was her name. And I can remember I've been hired, and I asked where her office was and went down there. And I inquired, "Do you have a schedule of games? Who do we play?" I had no idea. And she dug out a schedule for me. And what was noticeable on it was we had no home games. Here I go again, right?
Yeah.
But I guess I was a little bit used to that with my 1-18 team that I'd had at Crestview. Yeah, so they had us playing all over Creation and some good schools and some much bigger places that were very small, and no home games. And the guy who was that I thought was going to be the coach that they would hire, his son was their best player the previous year. He had been a junior. He was supposed to be coming back, but he got upset that he didn't get the job, and he left and took his kid. So
Yeah,
it was kind of a bare cupboard.
Yeah, I wanted to dig in around the program building at Heritage a little bit more, but I remember you taking this job, and I hadn't heard anything about it before you had accepted the job. But there was a period where you were trying to convince me to leave the big public school that I was at and come to Heritage. I wasn't like gung ho about it. I took time to deliberate on decision making. You always influence my decisions, but you always let me make my own decisions. I look back at that and think of how thankful I was that I did go to Heritage, and I had 3 years there that I played under you. But I do remember there being some deliberation, particularly around a girlfriend that I had that was that important to me at the time. And, I'm kind of weighing these factors, and I would have, lost out big time if I wouldn't have made that leap. But thinking about, this second version of you as a coach, you'd coached when you were younger, you're back into it after a layoff. You'd coached, AAU and church league in the meantime. What was different about the second version of Coach Larry Hackenberg from your first time around?
Well, I think certainly there's a certain amount of humility that you may get after all those years. You're older. Hopefully, you're wiser. I was raising children of my own. I had two older boys who had been to the school there. I think I understood parenting a little bit better. I understood, what it was like maybe for kids. The first time around when I coached, I was barely older than the kids I was coaching.
Yeah.
Maturity wise, I left some things probably to be desired there in some ways. So I think I was much more mature. And then I think one of my undoings in my first coaching career was I got awfully concerned with officiating. I'm not so sure I was wrong with my evaluation that we weren't oftentimes getting a fair shake. But I was pretty tough on officials, pretty flamboyant. And I did decide in this new coaching that I wasn't going to do that anymore, that I was going to leave them alone and just let them do their job. I think I'd let them become a distraction, beforehand. So I think that was different. I think I was maybe a little more realistic about, yeah, you're a coach and you think, I can coach. I understand the game. I understand how to work with kids and parents. But you know what? So does everybody else that you're coaching against. It's not so easy.
Yeah.
It's until you get in the arena, these guys want to win just as probably about as bad as you do, and if not even more so.
Yeah, it's
So,
funny. It's funny
what's
that
that?
it's funny that you mentioned the referees. I got into coaching as a 26-year-old head coach, and I had the same philosophy as you at my time at St. Thomas Aquinas. I hardly ever talked to the officials. I didn't complain to the officials. I told my players they weren't allowed to talk to the officials, and that worked out pretty good for me. I took the Glen Oak coaching job. I got into the Federal League and started competing against these coaches like Tom McBride at Lake and Coach Kinsley at Green. And I'd see them work the officials and to their benefit, where I felt like they were getting calls. And I started to getting on the referees a little bit more. I think I had one or two technical fouls only in my entire 9 years as a head coach. But that is interesting, just that my philosophy on the officials changed throughout the years. One of the things that I think about with you is, you got back into coaching after this long layoff. The game had changed quite a bit. And to kind of bridge that gap, you went to Championship Productions and you bought out probably the whole store there, where I had bookshelves full of coaching videos where you were trying to refine your coaching philosophy. This worked out great for me because, when I got into coaching, I was a young head assistant coach. While I was an assistant coach, I was doing double duty as I was coaching as an assistant, but I was also doing a lot of independent film study that started with plucking VHS tapes off of your bookshelf and learning basketball philosophy one tape at a time. So I've always appreciated that about you, that you're a lifelong learner, and that you noticed that there was a gap. The game had changed from the time that you had been a head coach in your 20s to getting back into it in the early 2000s. And you put in the reps to see what other people were doing and to pick the right schemes, to use with your team. But you had this gap where you were doing, coaching at First Friends, coaching some AAU teams. You had this rare opportunity to kind of reinvent yourself as a coach. And you land at Heritage, which becomes one of the most unique program building opportunities that I've ever seen. So we talked a little bit about the book study already, but people see the success at Heritage. My senior year, we were 20-2, we were state ranked, but they may not realize just how unconventional the program really was. And I want to kind of paint that picture. Some of the things we've touched on a little bit already. And the first one that I wanted to talk about was not having a home gym. So you take this job at Heritage. I think your schedule is 18 or 20 away games, and you coached your first year having no home games. Talk to me a little bit about this dilemma of not having a home gym and what you did to fill that void, to make sure that your program and your team wasn't at a disadvantage by having to play all your games on the road.
Well, the school was a the building was had been built in the late 20s or maybe even early 1930s. This was 2001 when I went over there. So you're in a building that's 70 years old. It did have a gymnasium, to be clear, but the size of the gym was like half size. And on the sides, if you went out of bounds, you also ran into a wall, a brick wall. It was unsafe, and you couldn't really practice there, let alone it would have been condemned. You couldn't ever play a game there. No one would come for sure. Safety hazard is why OHSA would not, approve that. So but we did practice there the first year. That didn't help us much at all. Had to do the JVs at the same time. Remember having like 30, and they wouldn't let you cut kids when I went there. And like every boy in the school must have tried out for basketball, and we had them all in the gym at the same time. You'd go home with a headache, a severe headache, every single night. So after that first year, I went to the athletic director and the powers to be and said, if you want winning basketball, if you want a program, which we could do here, we have to address this. And first and foremost, we need practice. So we would rent gyms for practice purposes for hour and a half. I think we were allowed to have. We were like everywhere and in different places from night to night. And as far as the schedule went, I I asked, you got to schedule in a way where we have half the games as so-called home games, and then we need to find a place to play. And the boys club extended to let us use their facility for games, and it was a full-size gym. Uh, you could maybe put a couple hundred people in there for a crowd on one side, and but it was loud. If you put a couple hundred people in there, do you remember it as being a place that like went crazy and was noisy as could be? People,
Absolutely. Yeah.
people, people hated coming there.
Yeah, and they had very friendly shooter rims at the Babe Stern Center that I loved. But I remember us renting Malone College and the Babe Stern Center to play games. I remember us having to do things like practice in the morning before school. We rented First Friends. The only time that we could get the gym was to have maybe a 90-minute or an hour and 45-minute practice before school, which was very interesting. I enjoyed it because you had your whole evening free, but I also didn't enjoy it because you had to get up so early. But creative solutions were required to get the program in a place to have success. And you went and did that instead of just sitting back and saying, okay, yeah, no, we'll play our 20 away games. You made it happen. The other thing that I thought was really interesting is, you take this job at Heritage. You've established these relationships through your grassroots coaching through the years. You're coaching me, you're coaching my brothers, but you're making these relationships. And when you decide to take the Heritage coaching job, there's other people that are disenfranchised with the public school coaching situation, and they want to come to Heritage and play too. And it was a major upgrade on our talent, getting a few kids to transfer in, but you had to do some creative things to make sure that the kids that wanted to come were accommodated in ways that they needed to be. And one of those was starting a cross-country program at Heritage. Heritage didn't have a cross-country program, And a couple of the players that wanted to transfer in and play for you were star cross country um, runners. Talk to me a little bit about starting a cross country program and what that looked like.
Well, a little bit of story. It's kind of interesting, I think. When it became known that I was going to be coaching at Heritage, within a day or two of that, I was at the grocery store and I ran into Paul Johnson, who I mentioned previously. And in the grocery store, Paul said, "You're going to be hearing from us again. I want Philip." He was a year older than you were, Matt, and he was an up and coming basketball player at Glen Oak. But Paul said, "I want Philip to play basketball for you. And I'm going to do everything I can to get him over there to you." Well, that took a little bit in itself, in that we had to tell Phil that he was doing something to help me out because we needed better players to scrimmage against, and we were doing all these open gyms. And Phil, he fell for it, and he loved to play basketball. So anytime that he could, that he didn't have a conflict, he would come over and play, and he got to know our guys. And uh, eventually they went and talked to the school, and he made a huge decision. He was going to be, he had been a starter on the JV team. He was certainly in the mix at Glen Oak. And here's this kid who has the courage to say, "I'm going to transfer to this little dinky Christian school." Amazing. But he had a friend for many years, also at Glen Oak, and also well into the basketball program, whose name was Brandon Imboden. Brandon was he was a state level class runner. And Phil was pretty good also. But for Brandon, that was his number one sport. But Paul Johnson and Phil, they carried the banner, and they talking to Brandon, "Why don't you come over and join me at Heritage?" So they took a trip. They went and met with the school, learned all about it. And after their meeting that day, Brandon's dad, who I'd played high school basketball against and knew, called me on the telephone, and he said, "Hey, we were over at Christian Heritage." He always called it Christian Heritage instead of Heritage Christian. Like for 2 years, he did that. And he said, "We were very impressed with it. Brandon was impressed, and I was impressed. And daggone it, if they only had cross country." And I've been in sales 20 years by that time. I said, "Mark, do you think if they had a cross country program that you guys would come?" He's pretty much said, "Yeah, that's, the only thing holding us back." And I said, "Well, I got great news for you. They're going to have a cross country program. It just hasn't been disclosed yet, hasn't been publicized yet." So we finished our conversation, and my next call was to Paul Amon. You remember Paul Amon, who was the principal. I said, "Paul, we need cross country, and it can't be that expensive to have a cross country team. How about let's get one put together?" And he did it for us. He found a coach, donated their time, and I was able in short order to talk to the Imbodens and say, "Well, I told you we're having cross country." And he did enroll, and he was a key player for us for the 2 years, and had a high finish in the state cross country meet, right?
Yeah,
I guess the biggest challenge with the cross country is I mean, we didn't have that many boys at the school in the first place. They'd never had the sport. So we had to come up with five, was it 5 or 6 runners?
Six, yeah, we had to have six runners. I do remember being voluntold that I would be running cross country to fill out a roster. I do remember my good friend Josh Pancher also being voluntold that he would be on the cross country team. We had enough. You couldn't just run as an individual. You might place as an individual in cross country, but you had to have a team to enter these races that include like 6 varsity runners. So Brandon and Phil are, state level runners, and me and Josh are there to fill out a jersey and to make sure we have enough people. So we would have these races where we are in the back of the pack. Me and Josh are basically drafting off of each other right at the end. We might even walk off the course and get a drink if it was convenient to us at times. I do remember one of the we had like a tri meet where Josh and I finished second to last and third to last in the cross country race. And the only person that we beat each was somebody that we had ran by who was getting medical attention and had collapsed on the course during the race. But, we fulfilled our duties to make sure that we had a team and to make sure that these players that were coming in, they could participate in a sport that they were having tremendous success at. I do think that cross country aided our basketball team where we were wanting to play an up-tempo style. We did some pressing, and we had a portion of our team that was in really good shape due to the cross country. I do remember, I hated the cross country. I didn't like doing it. I don't like running unless I have a ball in my hand. And I kind of got a get out of jail free card, which was I was standing in chapel one morning. We had chapel at Heritage on a regular basis, and I had passed out at school. And they take me and they ran some tests on me, and they thought that I might have Hank Gather's disease. And while all that was playing out, I didn't have to participate in cross country, which was I was very thankful for. We still had the team function so that Phil and Brandon could pursue their excellence in cross country. But I do believe that that's the only time I've ever been associated with the Hank Gathers in any way. Our basketball games did not resemble each other's whatsoever. Any other memories on this creating the cross country program, Dad?
No, it was pretty funny how that came together and how it worked out. And, certain things I think they happen because of faith. And I think there's a divine order to things. And I think the heritage experience was an opportunity to honor God. And I think that we were blessed. And I think that's one of the examples of it. And Phil and Brandon, they both went on to great careers. They both married Heritage Christian girls. The people that, had the faith enough in the school and the situation that actually, came there, they seem to have been blessed by it, and yourself included. It was life changing, I think, for the participants, including myself.
Yeah, we had, it wasn't just Phil and Brandon that wanted to come to Heritage after you took the job. We had different players through the years wanting to have that experience. I thought you were really good at creating buy-in within a team. So you're bringing people from, different environments together to form a team. We talked about that book study, but assimilating, this cast of characters into a school, which, Heritage wasn't somewhere that's like known for basketball tradition. We're trying to build that on the fly. Obviously, there's the religious element to it was very serious. But talk to me a little bit about assimilating different kids into the school and into the basketball program. I was not used to wearing a uniform to school every day. I know I had some issues where the principal would have to call you because I had forgot my belt or my uniform wasn't properly equipped. We had chapel, which, I was raised in First Friends Church. That was not something that I was uncomfortable with, but, some of the kids coming from different public schools, that was a new element to them. And then just the environment of being so small. My graduating class had 27 or 28 kids in it. I came from a public school that had 500 kids per class. So I went from, you might go a school day and you might not see your best friend all day long to kind of having classes with the same kids every period. You just move from one classroom to another. Talk about this assimilation process of getting kids from different environments, equipped to handle the school and the basketball program.
I think that we were very fortunate, very blessed in that. I think that I think that this teachers and the administration in particular, they were in our camp. They believed that we were trying to do the right things and that we were not only, just playing basketball, but that we were representing, the school well. Had a few occasions where guys would slip with their language during a game, and you might be real close to the a school administrator, and I might go and talk to them and say, "Hey, we're addressing this. We're going to try to do better with language." Even with the team, with in practices and stuff. Do you remember us where there was a language issue with some of the guys? So we made a rule that if you swear or say anything off color, you immediately you gotta run. It was a pretty decent running regimen right out of the blue, and we had a manager who was so on board. We'd cut him and then told him he could be manager, but then we ran out of enough guys to practice sometimes, and so he was also a practice player, but we didn't suit him up. And one day he caught himself cussing and volunteered that he had to get on the line, do his running. Remember that? That was pretty funny.
I do remember that, but more so, I remember, practicing at First Friends in the morning, and there would be a curtain. There would be two courts with a curtain between, and you had sent, I believe, Chris Cook over across the curtain to run, and then you forgot about him, or he was over there for like 20 or 30 minutes running by himself until somebody had reminded you that you had banished Chris off to do his running penalties. But these live streams are for coaches, and the thing that I really take away from our situation and what you built at Heritage was the limitations of your program that you have require creative problem solving. And you can't just take the circumstances that you have, accept it, and kind of doom yourself to a slow death. You have to get creative in how you approach things. And you did that. And I think that having no gym and starting the cross country program are great examples for coaches of thinking outside the box to make things happen for your program. When you look back at your Heritage years, Dad, what are you most proud of?
You guys, what became of the people who went through the shared experience that we did? They all were very impacted in a very positive way, and it certainly wasn't all basketball. Lives were changed almost kid by kid.
Yeah.
We worked hard at it. We did something that probably a lot of people, didn't think was even possible, and tried to do things the right way. That's what I'm proudest of.
Yeah. One of the things that really strikes me about your coaching career is that your teams didn't always look the same, and you were able to win in different ways from a basketball philosophy standpoint. You're able to adapt your system to your personnel. Your heritage teams evolved dramatically over the years. I want to talk about kind of how your style of coaching changed through the years. From what I remember, my first year there, the year that we played all of our entire schedule as away games, it was a pretty basic system that you had implemented, and you went back to the drawing board and you went to the system where the next year we were coming with more depth and we were pressing and trapping and running and shooting threes. I remember, that team and players graduating and it becoming, my senior year, and we played a lot more isolation for me. We played some more four corners. We still had the fast break, but we definitely managed tempo. And then, after I went on and started playing college basketball, you continued coaching, but you did some unorthodox things with your teams where you might have your center, your tallest player as the primary ball handler and playing more of a slow down, compacted style. Talk to me a little bit about just how you evolved your teams through your years at Heritage.
Well, I think to have that conversation, we got to go back to Canton South on that one. And I think the master at taking the talent on hand and forming the best team possible out of it, I think the master of doing that was my high school coach, Charles Red Ash. His teams would have similarities in that they were going to be sound fundamentally and take care of the basketball. And, they're going to play solid defense. But how those things came about every year, they were really, really, really different. And I think back to his teams when I was coming up the line, they were the big teams. Dick Cunningham that we mentioned, Dick Himes, who became a professional football player, Ronnie Young, who became a professional baseball player. So you get three pros there, and all of them were 6'5" or better. Those were the big teams, and he sat in a zone, and he played to that talent, which were the big guys. He also had good guards, with those teams also. But then when that had graduated, and I was a junior, we had Ron Young left. He was 6'5". So this was going to be the little team, although most of us, you'd be happy to have a Ron Young at 6'5" who could really, really play. Two small guards that started with Ron, fairly small front line. And that's the team that beat McKinley, whereas the previous teams had always lost to them in devastating, like last second losses usually. But he would change and build, use new offenses, new defenses based on the talent at hand. So that's what I had seen, and that's always what I tried to do. I would run into the counter philosophy of, hey, you run the same offense from 7th grade on up. And I tried that a few times. And I was giving people things to run that, heck, I wasn't going to run that with them because I was changing based on the talent at hand. So I think there's arguments for system that is very systematic, or the argument of you got to play the hand you're dealt. I always played the hand that I was dealt and tried to figure out, how can I maximize the individual that I have, and how do I maximize the group as a whole by virtue of how you were going to play.
Yeah, when it comes to program building, it is kind of recommended that you implement a system at your lower levels. You let the kids learn that system as they come through. And in a perfect world, all the coaches would do that so that they have kids that are prepared for varsity basketball by the time they reach that varsity level. That is hard to execute, and that's not always optimal. When you have these different groups coming through with their own personalities, kind of being able to keep pieces and parts of a system, but also having flexibility where you could change things, I think is ideal. But you flipped the script, in a major way, going from a conventional style to an unconventional style, back to a conventional style with tweaks along the way. My second year at Heritage, you decided to implement the Grinnell system. I have some video of the press that we used, which was a very aggressive press. I'm going to roll that film, and I want to hear you talk about, the decision to implement the system. And the system, really, what that means is it is a high tempo, fast break offense system with limited structure in the half court, paired with very, very aggressive pressing system that encouraged an up-tempo game. Requires a lot of depth to play, often 5-for-5 subbing. I think Grinnell at their peak would run 3 different units that were playing for maybe 90 seconds at a time or 65 seconds at a time, and then they'd sub a new lineup in. And we went to a pretty close version of that, maybe modified slightly. But we ran, we pressed, we trapped, we sub 5-for-5. Talk about the decision to implement that Grinnell system, and I'm going to load up the press defense film.
Well, again, I allowed myself to be influenced by my assistant coach, and he bought into it entirely. And interestingly enough, his kid had averaged 18, 19 points a game as a junior for us. He's the first kid who transferred in. That's Phil. And in the system that we went to that Paul was favoring, Phil was going to play 50, 60% of the time. And in fact, his scoring average went down. We won 11 games the first year, changed to this system that you're seeing here now, where you're at 3 minutes, we were changing units. And with sometimes it wasn't 3 minutes because if we weren't happy with the effort, or somebody lost their composure or loafed, we might change them in a minute. We did that from time to time, right, Matt?
We did, and I think I was a casualty of that some, but also a benefactor of that a little bit. It was interesting in watching film just to see how fast some of those lineup shifts came. I do remember, everybody, we were on board from a culture standpoint with this philosophy, but I do remember moments where players might be frustrated that they were in a groove and they were coming out of the game. It's very interesting to think about, Paul really championing this idea that kind of negatively impacted his son and his minutes played and shot attempts, but it was for the greater good of the team. Why was this team that we had the right fit for the system?
Well, you need those 10 guys, and we had some people coming in new. Another key Heritage kid or Glen Oak kid or two. We had the family kids that had been at Heritage before, so we were maybe had a little bit of a surplus this one particular year. So had we not gone to the system, hey Matt, you just made a 3-pointer. Did you see that?
I did the editing for these videos, so I included as many clips as possible of me doing good things. But yeah, we had we had a lot of mouths to feed, and this is one way to do it, where you're reducing minutes, but you're also able to play with depth. And when you're scoring more points, when you're playing a traditional game and scoring 55 points, there's only so many shots and there's only so many points. When you're playing an unconventional system and you're scoring 80 points a game, there's a lot more shots and more points to go around. We're looking at clips of this pressing system that we used, which is a man-to-man pressing system. We're over the ball. We're denying the ball in bounds. We're trapping ferociously. That's really the way that you have to do it if you're really running the system. You can't zone press it because zones are a little bit more easy to predict to break. So when you go to this man-to-man system, you're able to really latch on a lot more pressure. But talk to me a little bit about the goals of pressing in this way and what that allowed us to accomplish as a team.
Well, the tempo, we were able to generate tempo, and it was not a big deal if you beat the press and scored on us. I thought we covered up pretty well, and not too many teams would hurt us, but if they scored, we're coming right back anyways. We're grabbing it out of the net. We practiced it every single night, and a big part of it was the little thing of how do you grab the ball out of the net and get out of bounds and make that first pass quickly, as optimum as possible. A small thing, right? But we got really good at taking the ball out of bounds and getting pressure on the defense right away.
We were as good as I've ever seen at scoring back on people and advancing the ball after we got scored on. And it is that idea of next play from Coach K, where it's not that you don't have pride in getting a stop or playing defense, but once you get scored on, that's over with, and it's time for the next play. It's time to transition. And just time after time in the games that I watched and from memory, we're getting that outlet really quickly on a banana cut. We've got our head up the court. Everybody's sprinting lanes. We're advancing that ball and playing unselfishly from there. One of the unique things with this press is we could do this on misses or makes. I don't believe in this reel we see very much of it, but we would often trap the rebounder, hunt those passing lanes, and it's a lot like what Bucky McMillan is doing at Texas A&M now, where they're pressing miss or make. They just pick you up, they start guarding you, they just start trapping you. Talk a little bit about the idea of pressing, not just on made baskets, but also on misses.
I'd seen it, and I was intrigued by it, but I really didn't know how to teach it. And but I wanted us to try that, and we did, and found it could be very effective. We got hurt in one game, and we had to quit doing it because they would bust out of the traps. Before it was commonplace to have the jailbreak type fast break like you got great mileage out of, just peeling out with the big guy rebounder, just taking it on the dribble. You didn't see that at this time. This is 20 some years ago that we're looking at here now. And I think it's something to consider, but you have to really deal with the idea that you got to contain that rebounder.
Yeah, when you think about trying to create the most favorable game and forcing the opponent to play your game, more possessions probably end with you missing a shot than with you making a shot. Most teams don't shoot over 50%. So to be able to press, to double your opportunities to press by being able to do it on misses, I think is a big extender to creating the kind of game that you want to create, the tempo of the game that you want to create. And considering this is smaller school basketball, Using this pressing system, using the system in general, it really made depth a factor in every game. Where when you're at a huge school, a lot of teams might have enough depth to handle this, but you could run teams out of the gym that just didn't have the conditioning or the depth to play with us. So it forced depth to be a factor in every game that we played. Any closing thoughts on making the jump into using the system or this pressing element of the way we played?
One of the things that, I recall here that we talked about and that proved to be very true and represents that idea of the fist is the rim runner. How, we would really watch, the big guy going rim to rim and the importance of sprinting that every time, even though, what's the percentage of time that you're going to get a layup running that spot? And you might never get one, but the guy who came in as your sub playing against the guy who you've just run ragged, the team benefited as a result of it. That's a good representation of, I think what you get out of something like this.
Yeah, we would call that, a 1-to-5 pass where you're hitting your point guard on a banana cut. They're immediately getting their eyes up the court and they're throwing that one long pass to a rim runner for a layup. I had great chemistry with a lot of different players that played the 5 position for us, but particularly with Bucko Gully. I played in a system in college that continued having that rim runner. I thought, we were able to leverage not just the 1-to-5 pass, but also being able to advance the ball up the court, throw the ball inside in play, inside out. But I thought this was a bold call on your behalf to go to a system like this, but I think it really worked. And I really enjoyed studying the film and watching this system overwhelm certain opponents, and also this system kind of meeting adversity when there were teams that could hang around with us. But beyond just the pressing element and beyond running the system, I wanted to have a conversation about, your ability to adapt your talent, adapt your personnel to put your teams in a best position to win. I know you talked about Coach Ash's ability to do that, how you modeled after that. But you went from playing traditional to playing unconventional to playing slow down. You used 4 corners. You used a center as your primary ball handler. You used zone. You did all kinds of things in your time at Heritage, and it was all based around putting your kids in the position to have the most success. Any thoughts on that?
Well, the clips that we just watched, that was you playing as a junior on, really with the second unit and leading that second unit, which was neat that you could do that and accept that, because we had an older, mature, we had a good point guard, another good point guard that was older, bigger, stronger. When 6 of those, the key 6 players of the team that we just watched, those guys all graduated. That was a team that had won 17 straight after kind of a slow start and went to the district final. And we had won 3 tournament games and then lost in the district final to Sebring. We returned 4 guys off of that second unit. So we had no returning starters. We did have a new player, key player, come in. And that gave us, 5 legitimate players. But we didn't have the depth that next year. Now, instead of being 10 deep, it was really 6 or 7 maybe. So we kept the same no one was told we're changing things. We still ran that break. It was still good to us. We might press, but not like we did in that previous year. And we had set the school record in scoring with the team that you had the film clips on there. The next year, we did exceed that. We set a new scoring record with the leftovers from the previous year. But we also set the school defensive record. We emphasized defense and we emphasized blocking out because we weren't very tall. We'd lost size like crazy, but actually rebounded better. And so we made some modifications there, but the basics were probably in place that we didn't do anything with. But the next year was very light on talent, very light on shooting. And as that progressed and we're shooting like 20% from 3-point line, we went to a 5 out and eventually had our center, who was probably only about 6'2", Mike, handle the ball out front and initiate the offense to bring other people's big, out there. We won games in spite of the fact that we didn't have a lot, and we kind of suffered. We kind of suffered through compared to what we'd been doing, but in no way, shape, or form did that team look like the team from 2 years before.
Yeah, I think to think about, in your time at Heritage, setting the school record for points per game, and also setting the school record for fewest points per game allowed from a defensive standpoint, really hits home with being able to be adaptable and change your style to do what's best for your kids. I think that was your biggest tactical strength. I wanted to kind of pivot our conversation here into around bonding through this game of basketball. We talked about this already, father and son, coach and player, coach and coach. Talk to me, or let me see if you remember. Do you remember the story of you getting me involved in basketball for the first time, Dad?
I think I do.
Well, how'd that go?
Well, I was a parent, like maybe most of the listeners are, and you watch your kids and you want to see them happy. You want to see them doing things. Maybe nowadays you get upset because they have electronics and they won't get off of their phone or their computer. Didn't have that problem when I was raising our children and with my wife Gloria and raising Matt. But it bothered me when I looked out the window one day and I saw my youngest son out by the street playing in a mud puddle. And geez, is that the best that we could do for a kid? But I'd heard that First Friends had a basketball camp that was getting started that day. And I thought, boy, I should have got him signed up, even though he's pretty young for something like that. Matt was probably first grade or maybe not even. Whatever the age minimum was, I think he was below the minimum. But I thought I could get him into it. And I walked out to where he was, and he's playing in the dirty water. And I said, "Hey, Matt, you want to go to a basketball camp?" And he said, "Yeah." So he gets up out of the puddle, starts walking towards the house, gets about 6, 8 yards away, turns back to me, looks back at me, and said, "Dad, what is a basketball camp?" Right?
It must have been a good one. And I do, I think he had to pull some strings to get me in. We did have some sketchy recreational practices to pass time back then. I remember us with the neighbors doing the gutter sliding where it would rain and the gutters would kind of in front of the house would fill up with water and we would run and dive into them. I'm glad you got me into basketball so I could do more basketball and less of the gutter sliding. Uh, One of the things that I always appreciated was the support that I had once I chose basketball, once I committed to playing basketball. I had you coaching me, pushing me. I went on to play college basketball. You and mom traveled the country by car to come and watch me play games. I went to Kentucky Christian University, which was 4 hours away. So it was a commitment to come watch a game. I remember, you would drive down 4 hours, you would watch the game, say goodbye, drive 4 hours back, get home in the middle of the night. I would remember that I'd play the games and I would, go back to my dorm and, hang out with friends and play video games and do whatever we did. And, all that time had passed where I hadn't even been thinking about the game and you were still driving to get home from it. Talk to me about that period of your life of, you and mom traversing the country to come to these games and support me.
Yeah, well, it was a big deal to us to share that experience. Uh, I'm happy, very, all the times are happy but that was up there that, we had a common interest in a son that we had, made together and helped to raise and invested in, and that he had gotten to a level to be able to compete like that. That was pretty neat for us to make those drives. I don't think I never remember one time your mom complaining, and I don't think I ever groused about, having to make those drives. Something that we wanted to do, and we enjoyed it a lot. And we got to see our son for a little while, aside from the basketball part of it. And we talk about it. We've talked about it a lot over the years. She and I doing that. She was able to be more committed even than I was because some of those years I was still coaching.
Yeah.
So I had games to work around, and I had a business that I was trying, to keep an eye on and develop at the same time. But I missed the experience of watching you probably have the game of your life, but your mom was there. I don't know if you wanted to get into that or not.
I do want to get into that. You guys didn't miss many, but I do remember we had this national tournament game. We were out in Oklahoma, and I had scored a career high 59 points, and it was a double overtime game. We actually lost the game, but the funny story from that was you weren't there, and you were getting updates during the game, or I don't, maybe you didn't get updates, but you got an update after the game had finished and you were driving on the highway and you told me that when they had told you that I had had 59 points in the game that you got so excited that you almost drove off the road. Is that how that played out?
Yeah, pretty much. The reason I wasn't there was the high school team, Heritage, my last year there, very good team. And we had also gone to the district final again. And we were playing McDonald, like a number 2 team in the state, I think, which we lost to that night. But I was being interviewed by the newspaper, and that's when I got the first call. And Steve Dorshuk was interviewing me. And I said, hey, I really need to take this. And it was Mark Fritz. Mark said, this is, we're going into overtime or something now. And it was very hard to understand him on the phone and what he was excited, but something along the lines of the score, which was enormously high, and something to the effect that you had like 50 points.
Yeah.
And then I thanked him and finished the interview and met with the team, and we drove cars at that time. And by the time I got in the car, the game had finished, and yeah, Mark called back and gave me the full scoop. Not the full scoop, because if I remember what I was told about that game, and also I did get to see it on film, which was amazing.
Yeah, I have filmed that. I'm going to cue that up and run that while you finish your story.
Yeah, well, not only your performance, but I think there was a 3-point shot that you had made that was critical to getting the game to where
Yeah.
it was.
Yeah.
A buzzer beater kind of shot. But my other player, and now we had 3 kids from Heritage starting on this college team, Matt and Phil and Bucko Gully. 3 guys off of a high school that hardly had 50 kids in it playing at the college level. That's pretty proud of that. But Phil had made like about a half court shot, maybe at the end of regulation. Is that right? To
Yeah.
force it into overtime.
Yeah, Phil had a big bucket in there. The
I
lure
do.
for me with this game was that if you notice closely, I have black shoes on, and the rest of the team have white shoes on. And something had happened where before this game, we're traveling, we're in Oklahoma, we're a long way from home, but I didn't have a backup pair of shoes, and my shoelace broke of some sort, and I had to go to a backup pair of shoes, which was a Starberry shoe. And a Starberry shoe was Stephon Marbury's signature shoe. It was made by Stephen Barry, and it was known for its affordability. These are $15 sneakers. So I had my 59-point game. I had them in a pair of black Starberries due to crazy circumstances. And I took the shoes and I left them in the locker room. I figured I had used up as much of a $15 shoe as I could through that game, and they were retired with this game. But this is a tournament game. We did lose this in double overtime. I did play 50 minutes, of a total of 50 minutes to score 59 points. And we had like a consolation game the next day after I had played 50 minutes. I was completely dehydrated and sick. And I went out and played the next day, not feeling well. And I don't even think I got to double digits in the second game. But tell the audience about my skills. What were my basketball skills as a player, Dad?
Matt had a great ability with the ball in his hands, and he's number 13, if you haven't figured that out yet here. His ability to get into the lane with the basketball, the way the game is played today, where it's all about penetration to, somewhere in that lane. And Matt picked up on that. I had another assistant coach that I think really emphasized that well and helped develop Matt. But if you can get to the right there, you get the keys to the kingdom. And before that was prevalent so much 20 years ago, we were doing that as a big part of the teams I coached. And then the Kentucky Christian, a lot of the same things. of being able to penetrate and kick or penetrate and hit that slasher. And Matt played high school with Bucko Gully and then later at Kentucky Christian. Those guys had like a connection like you wouldn't believe for him cutting down the baseline on penetration, bucket after bucket after bucket. So Matt could score some points and at times would, but he was a great penetrator and passer, almost your offense, like you see professional basketball and college basketball being played today. 20 years ago, we were doing that, and we were doing it because we could. That's what we had, and we could do that, and we could control games that way. But at the time, it was the traditional thinking was, you got to pass the ball. It wasn't so much about spacing and penetration. And that's where you shine, Matt.
Yeah, I always considered myself like a playmaking point guard. The thing that's weird about the 59-point game is I really wasn't a scorer like that. I think, my senior year of high school, my senior year of college, I probably averaged maybe 16 or 17. But it was more on consistency. It wasn't like, having huge games was pretty normal. But I was, a good 3-point shooter, better off the dribble than as a spot up guy. But my main strength was driving the ball, getting in the lane. I could certainly finish around the basket, but I made really good decisions when I penetrated, and I was just as happy or even happier to pass the ball. If you sent a second guy to stop me after I got by mine, I would be happy to make the right play and pass it out for a 3-pointer or down to the baseline. And if you didn't, I would be glad to try to finish. I got fouled quite a bit. I was a solid free throw shooter, not as good as I like to be. But, I could do all the point guard stuff of organizing a team and setting up plays. But I would say Coach Schaus, I think, was compared my game to like Darren Williams. I was kind of a physical playmaking point guard, could score, but maybe a little bit more of a passer. But this is a great memory, and I think the only less credible person to describe my game would probably be my dad, based on what the audience will believe. But it's in the record books, and we have it on film here today. But we're in a segment here where we're talking about bonding through the game of basketball, and that extended into my coaching career, where I became the coach at St. Thomas Aquinas. We would play games, and my first phone call after each game was to you. You were never really officially on staff with me at Aquinas, but you did coach for me some in the summer basketball. But I do remember just feeling like I could call you after all the games, and you would tell me what I needed to hear. And sometimes you would get on me for decisions that I made. Sometimes you might throw the players under the bus if you thought I needed that. But I felt like I had a really good sounding board with you that could give me what I needed. Talk to me a little bit about being a sounding board for me throughout my coaching career.
It's an interesting question, because of the generational aspect. Not only had I been a coach, but I had been the son of a coach. So I knew what it was like, to play under your dad or with him involved in it. And I knew what it was like for him when I began coaching. He had a really hard time with it because he was overly interested in my success, and he would get so excited and almost to an embarrassing level, as a spectator. But I would call him too. It would be, I didn't have a cell phone, and you had to wait till you had phone available, but I would call him. And I remember one of my calls to him was one of the powerhouse team that we were playing against my first year at Minerva. We had gone to Poland and lost by 40 points, like in beginning of January. Horribly embarrassing. And then 2 months or a month and a half later, they came to Minerva, and we beat them by 40 points, 80-point swing. And my dad had heard the score on the radio, whether they said it wrong or he was expecting, well, they get the crap beat out of them again by this powerhouse. So I called him, and his first remark was, "Man, I'm so sorry. That's really tough." I said, "Dad, we beat them." He said, "I thought they said you lost by, like 40 points." He was really good in being a supporter. And that's what I wanted to be, was a supporter. And the last thing you need is criticism. I didn't think that I was ever critical. Had been in the arena myself, been bloodied up, and I know the pain of losing, because I felt like it was like almost death, to lose these games. So I tried to be supportive in all the ways that I could. I hope that I didn't let you down in that regard.
No, and basketball coaching is the ultimate roller coaster of emotions, where extreme highs and extreme lows. But basketball in general has given us reasons to spend thousands of hours together. I'm interested to hear from you, maybe if you have any favorite memories from my childhood that have nothing to do with wins or losses, but time spent together. Coming to my mind is just the times of watching the Cavs or even the Indians together. I think we had a routine for a while there where we would both open up a book and put the game on and kind of sit in relative silence, talking about, whatever might come up, but reading, kind of watching the game, but just hanging out. We did a lot of that. I would say my favorite story related to basketball together was I was coaching, you were coaching me in like an AAU setting, and I had just gotten my license. I was maybe 16 years old or something like that. And there was a scheduling issue where I had to drive myself to Cleveland to meet our team there that you guys were already playing. I was coming a little bit later in the day, but
you had to take some kind of test.
Yeah, I had to take a test.
ACT or something.
And I was driving there late, and I had started my drive. I touched base with you, and it would have been maybe 45 minutes, and I get a call from you, and you were wondering when I was going to make it to the event. And I'd been driving for 45 minutes, so I thought I must be getting close. And you started asking me, we didn't have like digital GPSs. I was following paper instructions, and I'm a new driver, and you were asking me for road signs. And I gave you a road sign, and you said, "Matt, you got on 77 South. You needed to be on 77 North." So I had driven 45 minutes in the wrong direction to meet the team to play our games. Do you remember that? And if you do you have any other memories of our basketball times together?
I certainly do remember it. I was not very happy with you that day, and took great care in the future to not let you drive to games independently.
Dad, I wanted to close the show here with the way that I close all of these basketball legacy shows, which is kind of reflecting on a lifetime of basketball and trying to pass that forward to some of our younger coaches. So, you've coached at different schools with different styles and different eras. What are you most proud of about your association with basketball through the years?
I think that you want to be able to look back and really value the relationship part of this coaching. You're so important. You don't realize how important you are until years go by, and you have the benefit of hindsight to see it, and you have the reflections of people that you coached. So just I think I'm proud that I was honest with players, sometimes in a way that at the moment might have hurt them a little bit. That you told them where they stood, what they had to offer, and what they could do about it, or if there was nothing that they could do about it, the honesty that maybe would lead them to spend time, on something else that they might learn to, like as well. But you're in a great position to affect these people, these kids that are coming up. I hope that hasn't changed very much. But I spent today at a lunch with a former player who's been tremendously successful in his life. And, we're talking about 50 years have passed. And those are the things that make it so special. And I think most of the older coaches that you're going to talk to, Matt, they would cite the same thing. It's some of the big wins are great and big records that maybe you were able to enjoy, but the relationship with the kids that came under your charge, and I think that's built number one by being real and being honest.
Yeah.
Those will end up as great relationships, even if they didn't become great basketball players or maybe even play that much for you.
Yeah, over and over and doing these legacy shows, it all comes back to the relationships. It all comes back to the people. People's proudest accomplishment isn't a title or an award. It is the relationships that they've built. My daughter Ruby just turned 7. She's big into gymnastics. Do you think I'll coach her to continue this cycle of adding another generation of the player coach? What are the odds you put on that, Dad?
0. I've seen some of your gymnastics talents. Let somebody else coach her.
Well, I don't want to coach her in gymnastics. I was thinking basketball.
Oh, basketball? I think that'd be great. Absolutely.
She's right at the age where you plucked me out of a mud puddle to get me interested in the game.
Okay, where can we find a good mud puddle for her? That must be the key to your success.
Closing question here. As we always end these basketball legacy project shows, with all your knowledge, with all your experience from your coaching days, what advice would you give for a young coach that's just starting out and wants to have a successful career in coaching?
I think I just gave it. To be a person first. Be a good person. Be honest. And work hard like you're asking these kids to work. The hard work that has to go into it today, enormous. I think that's the main thing. Not about X. It's not so much about X's and O's.
Dad, I've enjoyed reflecting on your career. You've affected the lives of so many people. I think we covered that with, the heritage of how these lives were changed. Certainly, basketball has been my, navigation through life here. It's been the most consistent thing in my entire life, from playing to coaching and now having a business. And that all started from a mud puddle. I enjoyed sharing your story with the audience here and documented the effect that you were able to have on so many people through the years. Love you, Dad. We're going to sign it off there.
Well, certainly love you and appreciate the opportunity to be on here with you, and can commend you on your great job as an interviewer. Hope somebody got something out of it here today.
I'm sure they will. All right, Dad. I'll see you soon.
All righty.